What up, folks? What it do? Welcome to another episode of the Best Advice Ever podcast. I'm your host, comedian Mike Goodwin, the bow-tied comedian. Now, for those of you that listen to this won't be a big deal to you either way. But for those that watch the video, this is my first time hatless. Your boy is without a fedora. I'm straight up, no hat comedy, but I'm bow tie comedy, so that doesn't matter. Well, thank you again for tuning in for another episode of the podcast. I have a little bit of a technical, like I say, issues. I ended up moving kind of my virtual setup to another space, and then I moved it back. This is where I typically locate from, and I'm not certain that everything's back in the proper spot. So we'll get that corrected. But how I start each and every podcast, talk about being on the road. On the road again. And so I was on the road. This week, I was actually in state. I was in Greenville, the upstate of South Carolina. Greenville is one of those places, I think, similar to people that live in different parts of the state. So, like, if you live in Charleston, you probably just come to Columbia to meet a friend, have dinner, go back, but you don't really hang out unless you go to a football game or something like that. The same I feel is true for Greenville with me. When I go to Greenville, I'm typically there for work. So I've not explored all that Greenville has to offer. Greenville has done some pretty tremendous things in terms of its planning, city planning, their growth and development, just the overall vision of what they as I guess the community government of what the vision of Greenville would be and can be. That it's very impressive. They have a lot of walking space. They have tremendous retail and restaurants and entertainment options. And so every time I go for an event, in my mind, I think, man, I really need to come to Greenville a little more often. I need to really come and spend more time in Greenville, South Carolina, because I'm always impressed every time I go up to the upstate how nice it is, how great it looks, and just always have that thought in the back of my mind, like, man, I need to do a better job of coming to Greenville. And it's only an hour and a half. It's a hop, skip, and a jump right up the road. But I did the South Carolina, or it's not South Carolina, but the Electric Cooperatives of South Carolina Winter Conference. I did that on a Tuesday. Basically, I was the keynote for the luncheon, and I did my set. I did comedy. So that's an interesting question that I'm sure someone may have. Speaking of questions, if you do have questions, feel free to email the podcast. I would love to answer your questions. That email address is info@comedianmikegoodwin.com. That's INFO at comedianmikegoodwin.com. Sometimes people say, and I can feel it on the inside, the question of what happens at a corporate event. Well, I probably do one of three things at a corporate event. Well, so at a corporate event, I could typically do my set. I'll do just a 30-minute. On average, it's probably, if I think about corporate events, on average, it's about 20 to 30 minutes of just stand up. And maybe there's sometimes where, like last week, I did a dinner, but I that was more. I did a corporate dinner, but I know that's comedy. For a corporate conference, a conference, a retreat, that's a little bit different in my mind. So I can do my set And like I said, that's typically 20 to 30 minutes because conferences are packed. There's a lot of things, a lot of activities, a lot of speakers and awards and announcements. And so it's quite rare that you do a full 45 to an hour unless you're the sole talker, the sole speaker, the sole entertainment, the sole program. You are the program, which typically doesn't often happen in the corporate setting. So I could do my set, which I that's how I really started in corporate. Just going and doing a set, doing comedy, 20 to 30 minutes of comedy after a luncheon, before lunch, to kind of break the mood. Oftentimes when folks will talk about having you to the common phrase, hey, we want to do something a little bit different. So that they have a comedian. So that's how I started. I would do my set. But then it morphed into doing a keynote. So my keynote, when I do corporate events, I can either do, like I said, first my set, number two, the keynote, which is my leadership and laughter, or laughter is a good medicine type keynote in which I have a speech that I present. I actually have two speeches that I do. One is the leadership and laughter, the lessons I've done from doing stand-up comedy, leadership lessons I've learned from doing stand-up comedy. And I just created a speech or a talk that I do called Championship Culture. And so one of those two keynotes, or number three, kind of a combination of the both. So what will happen? But my keynote is very hilarious. So it's an abbreviated version of a keynote. If I do, sometimes folks will ask for 50-50, which I don't it's weird how the requests, like, they want a keynote, but they want some funny, they want some points, but want some so you can either do it. You can either get all comedy, all keynote, or a combination of comedy and keynote. But the keynote is that already. It's just 45 minutes to an hour. So what I did at the co-op was a set, and I was a little interested to see, how it works. My set goes well because it's been crafted. I've done it enough. I feel pretty confident in it. But what was interesting, they had an employee by the name of Lou Green. He was retiring from the co-op of South Carolina, and the electric co-op. And he had, before he joined the co-op, had worked in our local radio TV station at WIS, which is Channel 10 in Columbia. So he was on a show called PM Magazine, which I remember when I was a young guy. And he had a career working in television, probably, let's say, 15 to 20-year career. I don't know the number specifically, but the organization roasted him before I came up, and they kind of did a spoof on the anchorman, because he was an anchorman, and they went back and got clips from back in the day, and it was very lighthearted and entertaining, and I thought it really set me up well because they were laughing. They were already in a pretty jovial spirit and mood, and so I just came up and did what I do, my comedy. So that was great. I did that. It was in Greenville. I drove up that morning, maybe around 9:30. Now it was raining, very, very rainy day. I drove up, parked. I think I was on the mic by 1:15, maybe. They had lunch. I got up and did about 30 minutes. So I did 30 minutes because I was on a clock. They had a clock, and I said my closing joke. When I ended that punchline, there might have been 4 seconds left on that clock. And then I got off the stage. And so I hung around for a little bit until they took a break. Then I got in the car and drove back to Columbia. So I was back home at the latest by 4:00. And then I think we just went business as usual. I think I went and worked out that night. So that happened Tuesday. And then I had a virtual event. I did a virtual event on Thursday for Thermo Fisher Scientific. It was a global webinar for the organizations. And again, when I say global, I'm talking France, Holland, Mexico, folks from all over the world had logged in, and I did my set. I did a set again, a corporate, but I think they titled it "Laughter is the Best Medicine." We titled it, but it was virtual, and that's why I changed my setup. So I moved my setup from here, which I really typically am in this spot, but I went to the office and I did 45 minutes of comedy for their event. I think it was an event connected with the Office of DEI and Family Support, if I'm correct on that. And so basically, they were wrapping up the end of the year. This is the end of the year wrap up, and they've had topics or areas that they focused on, and they wanted to tie it all up in a neat bow and end on a lighthearted, fun note. And so they reached out to your boy, and I logged on. Now it was on Microsoft Teams, which there's a variety of different platforms that folks are using. StreamYard is one. You have Zoom, Microsoft Teams. There's some others that you kind of log into folks' platforms, and depending on the platform, that oftentimes tell you the atmosphere of the event. So Teams is something I've done a lot. Not a lot, but I've been on Teams enough that I guess it's already downloaded in my computer, so I don't have to download it every time I log into a Teams meeting. But what they did, that's I think, pretty standard to virtual meetings now, is they muted and I think they disabled cameras. Yeah, I think they disabled the cameras and muted the audience. And so basically, I saw the two women who were the organizers of the event on my screen, and then I just saw a bunch of circles with letters in them: AS, FG, PW. It was just all these little circles. And I was telling the group that this typically would feel a little awkward had I not gone through the quarantine. So in the quarantine, I was one of these guys. I had no interest in virtual events, and so I have a good time when I do virtual events, and I don't mind doing. I'm not gonna say mind doing virtual events. I prefer live events. I would, if I have my druthers, I would rather do a live event. And so if you're gonna get me to do a virtual event, there is a premium to be paid, because that's not my typical desired go-to, but I do a great job. I have a wonderful time. It's always fun. It's just one of those things. It's like, so y'all can't get me a flight, but we had a virtual event, and it was great. It went. It was very. I had a good time. I did some research about the organization Thermo Fisher Scientific, and I was kind of bebopping around on their website. And I typically, I'll look at images, I'll look at videos if folks have videos posted. I just kind of get a feel of what the website communicates. And it was a great looking website. So Thermo Fisher Scientific, and they love science, and they use a phrase that was pretty interesting. They serve with science. And you can kind of see that their focus was around making workplaces or just anything that they are associated with, making it safer, healthier. And there was another word that they used to communicate their mission. So I went and I was looking and I saw their values. So I was like, oh man, you always learn a lot about organizations reading their mission statement and their values. Well, this particular organization, They had 4 values, but they were all words that started with the letter I. All the words, all 4 words. If I can remember them, I may not have it on the top of my head now, but they were innovation, intensity, engagement, not engagement, involvement. I don't know where engagement came from. Involvement, intensity, innovation, and I can't remember the other. But it was 4 I words that represented their values. And so I was just, setting them up. I was talking about the organization and the things I read. I said, hey, I got to your values. And I saw y'all only use our words. You know the other letters in the alphabet. So I spent a good amount of time. Now I couldn't see the chat. Now the chat was popping. That was one thing that I could not see, because if I opened the chat, I think it would have made the window smaller. And I was, the way my camera set up, you probably can tell even when the podcast, I'm looking up at the camera. The camera's not in the computer. So if I look down at the computer the whole time, it would seem a little bit impersonal. And so I wasn't looking at the computer to see the chat, but my wife had logged on and she told me that people were putting other I words in the chat. If I would have saw that, I would have went for another 10 minutes on the values. But I just talked about, hey man, there's other words like creativity, there's C's, and you can hard work, motivation, inspiration. Well, inspiration, that's another I. That's another I we can add that to the list of values. So had a great time on the virtual event that I did, and they had a number of attendees. I mean, I looked at one point, and there may have been 700 plus attendees that were on this virtual comedy show that I did. So I was on the road physically, but I also was virtually on the road last week. I had a great time. So now I want to share with you, my listening audience, this week's best advice ever. So every week, the purpose of this podcast is for me to come on and share insights that I've gained in my years of living as it relates to my time in entrepreneurship, my time serving in the United States military, working in secondary and higher ed, just all the gems and the sage advice that I've collected over the years. And just growing up in Camden, South Carolina, where I had a pretty significant understanding of leadership as it related to watching members of my community, whether that be my grandmother, who basically led our family from her apartment, her place of residence. I spent a lot of time with her, watching the ministers and pastors that were leading the congregations of the church that I attended, my coaches that led sporting teams, and the teachers that led their classrooms. I just at a very early age, have been interested in the dynamics of organizational growth, leadership, and leadership development. And so the advice I want to share and will share with you today in the Best Advice Ever podcast is simply, and I think this is more of and I may be incorrect, but it sounds more like a Southern idiom, Southern phrase. And I'm going to say it in the way that it's communicated, and it's basically, closed mouth don't get fed. Grammatically, that's atrocious, I'm sure. But the spirit of what's being said is you have to ask for what you want. A closed mouth doesn't get fed, is the best advice ever this week. So I've started working very early. As it relates to jobs, I had maybe that entrepreneurial streak that was already part of my DNA, and I just really hadn't tapped into it. But I have uncles that are entrepreneurs. They've been entrepreneurs as long as I've been around. I have an uncle who's a contractor, a builder that lives in Florence, but he was a pastor, and I just thought he was, Uncle John that was the pastor, and didn't realize that he was building subdivisions. He built our home, the home I grew up in, and he's, for the last 40 years that I've known of, has crafted a career in building homes and neighborhoods, and creating opportunities as it relates to real estate. And then I had another uncle that had a car detailing service. He's also has a number of Airbnbs. And then the uncle that I'm thinking about this advice is the catalyst or the inspiration for this advice is my Uncle Daniel. So my Uncle Daniel, when I was growing up, he was a police officer, but he also had a janitorial service. He also had a lawn care service, for both of which I was employed. Now, I never received compensation. Maybe my mother received compensation, but I was offered out to get some work done. So I probably started. I mean, I can remember working on janitorial jobs when I was maybe 12. I mean, I was young. 12, 13. We were, and my uncle had contracts with school districts. So we were not like cleaning a laundromat. No, we were cleaning a school, the high school, the middle school. And I, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that my uncle may have had both the janitorial contract and the lawn care contract in a few of these places. I mean, I'm talking about like high schools, the Kershaw County School District. Like he had places. Now, to me, 12-year-old, 13-year-old Mike, none of this meant anything other than like you could go through people's desks and find some stuff. You see a lot of things in school offices. Some candy that maybe some contraband that the student had and has been confiscated, and now I've confiscated. I'm not saying I took these people things from their offices, but I might have went and took a look. Let me see, a gander. But my Uncle Daniel was a serial entrepreneur. Like he drove trucks. Like I said, he had his janitorial service, lawn care service, and I worked for him. I cleaned office buildings. We resupplied stock, supplies. I cut grass, like not like a yard. I cut like a school with a push mower, not a riding lawnmower. I'm like young Mike Goodwin cutting acres, right? And so my Uncle Daniel, basically how it would happen, he would pick me up early and we would go, and I would, make sure I had gas in my lawnmower, and he would show me the area. He kind of like drop me off, let's say at 9 o'clock in the morning, and he probably would return around 12, and he might have a sandwich. I think there was some food, possibly. I mean, I don't, but it might have been hamburgers, and fries, and a drink. I can vaguely remember that. And then after you ate, you back at it, maybe let's say from 1 to 5. I mean, it's just long stretches of time where it was just me and the lawnmower and no adult supervision. And so at the end of the day, my Uncle Daniel would come, you know, inspect the work that I've done, get the equipment, and take me back home. But on the way home, he often would stop at the gas station, whether he would refill the car with gas, he would get something from the gas station. And so we would go in there and he would buy something to drink. He would get something to eat and make some chips or something. But he would never ask me, hey, you want something to eat? You want something to drink? Never. It was never. And I'm looking at him with a knot of money. Like my Uncle Daniel's one of these guys that carried a little wad. Like we live in a day and time. So that, I keep money. I don't know if I should say that. Hey, no. But it's not uncommon for me to have some cash on me. It's not, that's not an uncommon thing for me to have some cash. Because the men that I looked up to, the men that I knew when I was growing up, always had cash. They had a stack of cash. And so that's what I thought you did when you became of age. You had a little money clip with some cash in it. So if you're listening to this podcast for nefarious reasons, I only have Monopoly money on me. I don't have real cash. So I would look at my Uncle Daniel, he would get his stuff, and then I wouldn't say anything, and then we would leave and get back in the truck. He would take me home. And I let that happen a few times because I was just thinking in my brain, surely this man knows that after cutting 4 football fields, that my young palate would be very appreciative of a little Gatorade, a little Ruffles, a Dorito, a little oatmeal Debbie cake. Come on, man. Without a shadow of a doubt, this man knows that I am hungry. Not hungry. I'm hungry. That's like the U is becoming A. Hung. Is that a hungry? Like I could pass out type, famished. I'm just ready for some nutrition. Now, everything I wanted had zero nutritional value. I wanted some snacks, man. And so at some point, I started to recognize that, hey, man, this guy's not going to ask me, do I want anything? But anytime I say, hey, Uncle Daniel, can I get a Gatorade? I'll be like, oh, yeah, go ahead and grab you one. Can I get some chips? Yeah, get some chips. Can I oatmeal pie? Yeah. So it made me understand that, okay, if I don't ask, I will not have. Knock, and the door shall be answered. Seek, and thou shalt find. And so I submit unto you that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Like you may have desires and wants, and you know that the person that you're working with or connecting with or partner with has these resources, has whatever it is that you're interested in, and you just think that at some point they're going to offer it to you. That might not be the case. They might just be waiting for you to ask. Closed mouths don't get fed. So that's the advice. And I think there are 2 reasons why you can cultivate 2 things if you think about the ask. Because number one, you need to ask. That's just, you need to be able to practice the ask. I don't know if you should lead with the ask. Don't lead with the ask. Gotta say that carefully. Lead with the ask. That's a dating advice right there. Don't lead with the ask. You hear that? I'm putting the k on it. Don't lead with the ask. So yeah, but you have to ask. Because number one, it either identifies or it allows you to cultivate your courage in business, in life, in relationships. You gotta have courage, and you have to cultivate your courage, and you can't assume or think that someone else is going to give you an opportunity to share. You have to ask, hey, are you free next week? I want to sit down and get some feedback of how this project is working. And I noticed that you have 1,000 bow ties. Can I have a bow tie? Ask. Now the other thing, so you can cultivate your courage, or you can be stuck in pride, and that's one of the reasons people don't want to ask. You're proud. Yeah, I don't know why I wasn't asking my Uncle Daniel for stuff. I worked a full day. Like I worked a full. I'm talking about physically taxing work. I didn't sit, didn't move widgets. I wasn't typing in data. I was physically working. And so surely I'm worth some Gatorade, some M&Ms, a Snicker bar. But I can remember not being afraid. I mean, being afraid to ask. What he's gonna say? No. And he could have said no. But I wasn't savvy enough. It was like, hey, the money I made today, let me get $1 out of that. Like, I don't know how much I'm getting paid, but let me get that dollar. Let me get $2. I think about my children. I want them to ask. I want to provide good, I'm gonna give them good gifts because I'm a good dad. But I also want you to ask. So sometimes you're afraid to ask, and the person's just waiting for you to ask so they can say yes. They want to say yes. So if pride is an issue that restricts you or puts you in a position where you don't want to ask, that's something you need to take a look at. You need to evaluate. No man, no woman is an island. I've said this before. I might have used this as one of the best advice. Well, I don't think I've used it yet, so I don't think I need to say it yet. I think I need to hold on to that. I might have said, I don't know, but I hate when people do that and then don't say it. So I'm gonna say it. And it's the simple advice of if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so if you want to go far, you need a team. You need people. You need to be able to have the ability to ask. So make sure that you're mindful of that you are thinking about the issues that restrict you from asking for help. You got to get over that. You got to get over that. And again, now, I think it's important for us to seek out to problem solve. To problem solve. I think that's a great skill and a gift and a practice. To don't immediately go to the help. Try to figure it out yourself. Try to do all that is within your power to do. But you probably can do more faster if you asked, if you opened your mouth and was fed some information. That I don't know if that's that sound. I say some sentences that's like, yeah, I don't know if that's. But yeah, closed mouth doesn't get fed. So that's the best advice ever for this week. Practice, cultivate your courage, and eliminate your pride. I mean, be prideful. Have respect and have some pride. Pride is an interesting concept, right? Because you need pride. I want you to have pride. But there also is a level of humility that you must have, that you need to put your pride to the side. So yeah, pride's a very, very complex issue. Life is complex. And that's the thing that I think that I'm learning. You know, my pastor said something this morning that was illuminating. He said that he recognized he was being arrogant, being an arrogant person, doing things that arrogant people do. And I realized recently that I have been very abrasive or a nuisance or just a level of needing to say stuff all the time. That I'm in this place of I don't need to say that. I don't need to say it. And I've found myself more and more times just filtering, and not even filtering, like not saying anything. Like, nope, don't say it. And I really was like, man, I wish I would have learned this 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And this is a great tie-in. This is a great tie-in to the what you're not gonna do. So, as y'all know, I look at the USA Today for what you're not gonna do, right? And so I want to probably get away from doing some of these because I'm not finding good stuff. The good stuff is going. But I did see something from South Carolina that says that but it's weird because it doesn't give you it gives you information, but it doesn't tell you why. So South Carolina, which I typically, one of the first ones I take a look at, Charleston. I'm going to read it. It says, a program aims to make the teaching profession more accessible to Black men who are vastly underrepresented in classrooms in the state and around the United States. Their absence in the classroom is deeply felt, especially in states like South Carolina, where almost a fifth of the students are Black, and Black males account for less than 3% of teachers. Now, that's the Call Me Mr. program. I'm very familiar with that program. My nephew was inducted and went through that program. Actually, when I was in college, I had considered majoring in education. And so I think the Call Me Mr. program was just beginning or had just began or didn't or began very shortly after I graduated. So I saw a lot of energy around the Call Me Mr. program. But in this article, it's not even an article, it's like a little blurb. It doesn't even name the Call Me Mr. program. So what you're not gonna do is give us the details of the program, but not tell us what the program represents. Now, I do have something for what you're not gonna do, because what you're not gonna do, and this ties into what I was just talking about in terms of like not saying everything you think or trying to be funny all the time. So stay with me. Tell the story. Put myself on a timer here, because I don't. People are like, hey man, don't make this an hour podcast. So I'm gonna tell this story pretty quickly. So at the event that I was at this week, I was at the electric co-op of South Carolina. So in the audience was a man by the name of Willie Jeffries. Now, if you're not familiar with Willie Jeffries, just by me saying his name, if you're from the state of South Carolina, that name it should resonate with you, especially if you are a person of color. That name should resonate with you. So Willie Jeffrey was longtime coach of the South Carolina State Bulldogs, which is here in South Carolina, located in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He had 2 stints with South Carolina State. He had this first stint, and then he's also, I think he's the first African American coach to coach at a predominantly white Division I institution. He coached at Wichita State. So he left South Carolina State and he coached at Wichita State. And he's also been inducted in the College Football Hall of Fame. So pretty significant career. was issued the Order of the Palmetto by Governor Carroll Campbell. I may be wrong, the governor, but that's the highest award that a civilian could receive in the state of South Carolina. And so that's Willie Jeffries. He's at this event that I'm at, and he's a member of my fraternity also. But at this moment in time, and if you know anything about Coach Jeffries, he's hilarious. If you ever heard him speak, he's very witty, very funny. It's very hilarious. So I noted that he was in the audience when I was up, or somebody mentioned it to me in the hallway, and then when I was on the stage, I identified where it was at. And so, yeah, someone was talking to me in the hallway and was telling me that they had a conversation with Coach Jeffries at lunch, and he had said something hilarious. And so I was excited to be on stage and show my wares, to do my thing. So I noticed Coach Jeffries while I'm doing my set. So afterwards, I find him, we take a picture, we exchange number. He said text me that picture. So he gave me his number. I have Coach Willie Jeffries' number in my phone. Hall of Fame coach. I mentioned that one of the founders of our fraternity, that his face lit up. He was like, "Man, I knew it. So we had a fraternity exchange. It was great. This great heartwarming experience. Matter of fact, I emailed some of the members of my fraternity that are in my chapter, and I told them the story. I told them, "Hey, man, Willie Jeffries was at the thing, and he said this fraternity question, and I answered with this fraternity answer. That kind of thing." I told those guys. Then I told another couple of fraternity brothers of mine that I'm on like a group chat with. So I'm feeling good. Got this picture. Just met Coach Willie Jeffries. Now, what you're not gonna do is be under the impression that because the feelings that you have, I'm kind of at a loss of what I'm trying to say. Basically, what you're not gonna do is not treat people well. That's what you're not gonna do, right? So Willie Jeffries, I have this exchange. So then, let's say a day later, I go to a place because I don't want to out a person, but I'm at a place that I go to pretty regularly, and I'm talking to the person. I'm like, "Hey, man, was at this event and Willie Jeffries was there," and the person that I shared this with wasn't happy about it, and he said, "Forget Willie Jeffries," but he did not say "forget Willie Jeffries." He said the other word that a person would say if they were using language. Forget Willie Jeffries, like legitimately vitriol, like very stern. Wasn't no joke. Wasn't like, "Oh no, I'm just messing with you." So now I'm curious, like, yo, what? Huh? Why? We talking about an 85-year-old man. What is going on? And he was like, "I tell him to his face. If I saw him, I'd tell him the same thing." So now I'm intrigued. I'm like, "Hey, man, what happened?" So this person tells me a story. Now this person, this is an older person. This person now is well into their 50s, let's say. But when this person was 19 from Orangeburg, this person left to go play football in another state, but really wanted to come back home, wanted to play somewhere close to home. So was home for the summer, had played a year at this particular university that was a couple of states over, and happened to be in the grocery store. And who did he see? Coach Willie Jeffries. So this 19-year-old man, knowing that he's been spent a year playing football at another college but wanted to come home, sees legendary coach of one of the schools that he would more than likely love to be a part of the football program. So he sees Coach Willie Jeffrey, and he goes to approach him. It just happened to be at the grocery store at the same time. He goes to approach Coach, and Coach shoos him off. He didn't even acknowledge him. He didn't say, hey son, I'm in a rush. I don't really have time. Here's my card. Give me a call. Stop by the office. Nick, are you in town? Stop by. None of that. He did not have no. He just shooed him away like, no, I'm not talking to you. You're not worth my time. So at that moment, the person I'm talking to was devastated, was hurt, was like, hey man, here I am, my night. And I'm looking at, he's an adult now, but it's like, I was a good kid. I was a 19-year-old kid. I truly was interested in coming back and playing. And he was like, well, what if that was what like spiraled me out of control? What if that was the thing that was like, man, nobody cares about me? That could have sent me down the wrong path. Like, oh, forget football, forget Willie Jeffrey, forget football. And it was amazing to me. Like, and it's like he transported back to being 19. Like that feeling of embarrassment, of hurt, of disappointment, that still lives in his chest. Like that still is available. And it made me think about myself. So yesterday or a few days ago, I needed to get a key for my car fob or fab, to unlock the car. So I have this new vehicle, and the place that I need to get it from is on the other side of town. So I drive to the other side of town, and I don't know anything. I'm just kind of looking at the signs. I'm looking for the service area, looking for parts so I can go get a battery. So I walk in, and I kind of weave and dodge and weave myself through like the waiting area. And so I was looking like for a front desk. So I went into like the showroom where they were selling cars. It was, two salesmen and somebody at the desk. So I was just gonna walk over and say, hey, I need to get this battery replaced in my car alarm, the fob. But let's just call it a fob. So first guy is a black guy standing there. There's a white guy over there too. Willie, the white guy's on an iPad. Black guy's closest to me. Black guy looks up. I say, hey man, I'm looking for the race means nothing. That's how I described it. It's not gonna come back later in the story. So I said, man, I need a battery. So he looks up and he didn't say anything. And he said, oh, okay. Follow me. I got you. Follow me. So we used to walk. So we take maybe 10 steps. He said, hey man, are you that comedian from Camden? And I said, yeah, Mike Goodwin. And so he laughs and, man, I love your stuff. Right. Very, very favorable exchange. Man, great stuff. You're very funny, whatever. So we walking to the key thing. Once we get to the area, he tells the guy, hey, put it on account 4473. That's not the real account. But so the guy basically pays for my battery to be replaced. I don't know how much the battery was. And anytime you go to one of those things, you think it's super expensive, but then they pop it open and I'm like, man, I could have went to a little battery store, I bet, and got the same battery. But my man, he covered the price, right? Covered the price. And then he basically like, hey, can we go and take a picture? I got my phone in my office charging. I was like, yeah, no doubt. Great exchange, right? We take a picture. He has like his information on a pen, hands me his pen, and I head out. On the way out, I run into someone that I knew. He's a music artist. He does a lot of shows. So they always doing weddings and events. So we have an exchange. Man, it's good to see you, man. See you doing your thing. Very favorable exchange. So on the way to my car, I'm thinking, oh man, this is like the Willie Jeffrey situation. Because if you talk to those two guys, they like, hey man, they go and tell somebody, hey, I met Mike Goo. You wouldn't believe who I saw today, Mike Goo. And I bet you it's somebody out there in the world that would say, forget Mike Goodwin. Like, I'm sure there are people that went to college with me. I'm thinking of a person right now. There's a person that, for as long as I just want to tell him, man, I'm sorry. I apologize. I shouldn't have said that to you, treated you like that. But yeah, And I've learned there's been others. If you went to college with me, if I worked, I think there's some people when I worked at graduate school, I worked at the University of South Carolina, there would be some forget Mike Goodwin people there. There's some members of organizations I've been a part of that would say forget Mike Goodwin. And so that really brought it home to me around what you're not going to do. So it's two what you're not going to do as I think about it. And so when I was thinking about this earlier, I was kind of fumbling and stumbling. Number one, what you're not going to do is lock people into the version of them when you met them. So yeah, the guy that's upset with Willie Jefferson, he has every right to be. Coach could have handled that a lot differently. But I'm certain that coach is not that same guy. Coach is not the guy that would shoo off someone if they were approaching him and wanted to have a conversation. So what you're not going to do is hold people to a version of them that they no longer are. And then what you're not going to do is be the same version of yourself that you've always been. I think it's always opportunities for us to grow and develop and improve. The biggest house or the biggest room in any house is the room for improvement. And again, I just brought it home to me because as much as that guy, and then he actually put the post on, he put the picture on Facebook, and there were people commenting, and somebody was even like, so what you sell them? None of your business, Joker. We on here talking about what you sell them. Dude was like, oh, those were cool dudes. That's my guys. What you sell them? Boy, people are a trip. What you're not going to do is get on the internet, on social media, talking about what you sold Mike Goodwin. I've already been on here talking about all the money I carry with me. Now I don't need to be talking about this particular vehicle that I was, this particular brand of vehicle I was at. But yeah, think about that in your own regular life, in your own life. There are some folks that would be like, oh man, this is the greatest, coolest person ever. And then there's some people who be like, forget that dude. Forget that woman, man. So if we can, I would encourage you to go back and mend bridges and fixings and the stuff that, folks have sustained some hurts and injuries on our behalf. Well, thank y'all again for tuning in. I've been able to make it under an hour. My buddy asked me, thank you for being under an hour. I'm under an hour. What you're not going to do, I go long, folks, y'all. I hope it is entertaining. I would love feedback. How y'all enjoying the podcast? This is new for me, but I think I'm catching my rhythm. I'm catching my pace. Also, if you want to send in any information, questions, you can email me at info@comedianmikegoodwin.com. Also, check me out. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Bowtie Comedy, on Facebook, Comedian Mike Goodwin. You can get to my website, mikegoodwin.com, for any type of information. I got merch. I got booking requests. I have my dates upcoming. Actually, I'll be in Ohio, OH10. I'll be in Ohio December 21st. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and December 22nd, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. So if you're in that area, I would love to meet you. I'm coming with a couple of buddies, Mark Gregory, Tim Shropshire, and C. King. We're doing the On the Come Up comedy tour. So we're putting together a little comedy Voltron, and we're getting out here on the road. And so this upcoming December 21st and 22nd, I will be in the fine state of Ohio, the Buckeye State, OH10. And so I would love to see your face in the place. Again, thank you for listening to another episode of the Best Advice Ever podcast, man. I've been your boy, Mike Goodwin. Peace.